Welcome to a ride on the outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
All right, everybody, welcome aboard this little mini-sode for the MMA Outsiders. Now, obviously, a lot of stuff going on here at the Empty the Bench Network with football and all sorts of other schedule arrangements. Obviously, no UFC card this weekend, so a little bit of an off week for us, but we are actually here because we are going to do a little quick wrap-ups and talks about some topics that are going on in MMA. I'm Tom Albano, that's Zain Bando. So yeah, not a full-on episode, but at least you're going to get some content from us. There are some things to talk about.
Yeah, there are some things to talk about for sure, and even though we have a total dead period in MMA in terms of no UFC event this upcoming weekend, we figured it would be a good idea for us to come on and just break down some different news and other nuggets of information, as well as a couple of mini recaps as we get into what's going to be a busy month of September. There's going to be an event every weekend, minus the second to last weekend of September, and then we're going to go every week through the month of October into November, all the way up until Thanksgiving, until the final two UFC events of 2024, which take place on December 7th and December 14th. So enjoy this mini break while you can. Thank you again for tuning into this edition. As we know, it's not a normal show, but be sure to like and subscribe to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. This is very important as we are slowly but surely approaching 1,000 subscribers. We just passed the 860 mark, so a very, very slow and steady climb. Greatly appreciate everyone that's continued to tune in. Not only to this show, but to Tough Enough, my show, Bando's Breakdowns, ETV Sports, Game Changers, and all the other shows that we have across the network. We really appreciate it. You can do that right now by going to youtube.com/ETP Network. Only takes a couple of seconds. And if you are listening on the audio-only platforms, again, you can listen to the MMA Outsiders wherever you hear podcasts. You can listen over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Premium, so much more. Be sure to do the inverse of that. Go over to the YouTube home and more info regarding all of our shows over at the YouTube home as well. And I'm going to let you take it away for the playback honors now.
Of course. So we can't forget that the MMA Outsiders and everything else here at the Empty the Bench Podcast Network is presented by Playback. If I can find the banner for it, there we go. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, ripping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETV Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. All right. We're going to hop right in just because it's a brief episode. Quickly go through a couple of different things here because we still have some things we got to talk about. This is a very recent report that came out just yesterday. Arman Tsarukyan is preparing for UFC 310 in December. Now, UFC 310 in December has a lot of questions surrounding it. Is Conor McGregor going to fight? They had the report last week that we talked about on last week's show about Belal Muhammad making his first title defense in Vegas that month, either against Shavkat Rakhmonov or against the former champion Kamaru Usman. But now, apparently, according to Arman Tsarukyan, that he is preparing for some sort of fight in December, some sort of title fight. That either Islam Makhachev is going to be ready earlier than we thought it was going to be, and that fight that was supposed to take place at 308 now takes place at 310, or they go along with the lines of an interim title fight, which, if they do that second option, Zain, means one of two things. Either Dan Hooker, per his win over Mateusz Gamrot in upset fashion at 305, is going to face Arman Tsarukyan for the interim title, given that those are the only two guys coming off wins in the top 5 of that division, or that the UFC might be confident Max Holloway could get past Ilia Topuria in a round or two when they meet at 308 and could make a quick turnaround to face Tsarukyan at 155 for the interim belt.
See, I think if they go with the Max Holloway option, I think it's too quick of a turnaround. You'd run into a Sydney situation potentially where you're hoping Holloway stays healthy through camp.
Right. And you never know with the Nevada Commission. We've already found that out with Tough.
Yeah, you never know with the Nevada Commission. And one person you didn't mention, although he just fought for the title, to me, another person that makes sense is Dustin Poirier too. Just considering that it's still his last swan song, he's been hinting at a potential retirement fight, and I give it one more title fight for the heck of it. Just considering that the UFC rankings don't matter anyway, and then the other option,
see Khalil Roundtree.
No, true. See Khalil Roundtree, see Joe Soto, and see a bunch of other options too. But again, another option that could be realistic, and I know people are going to hate this, is if the UFC wants to move on from this McGregor Chandler situation, you can have Arman Tsarukyan and Michael Chandler, and what would be very controversial, just considering that Chandler is 2-3 inside the UFC. But I think option one is the UFC's hoping Islam will be ready. It sucks the fight's not in Abu Dhabi because all the Abu Dhabi officials and whatnot wanted this fight. They couldn't get it. They couldn't make it happen. So Vegas would get the would get that end of the stick, if you will, which would be very interesting. But I just hope that Arman Tsarukyan gets some sort of title fight. He's earned it. He's the rightful number one contender, whether it's against the champion, whether it's for an interim title, whether it's a unification bout in the future, he deserves a title shot. So
yeah, I think you're right. They're either hoping, number one, Islam Makhachev is ready, or number two, they hope that if Islam is not ready, at least Dan Hooker could be ready, medically cleared and everything, to do an interim title fight. Like you said, I know Poirier is still an option with his last swan song and everything that they want to do. But he's coming off the loss to Islam when the fight that supposedly Islam got hurt in. But there is also, Arman beating him at UFC 300. But, you got the former champion Charles Oliveira too as a potential option.
You do, given that was his last loss. But would it be a bit unfair, just considering that Oliveira?
Yes, I
Oliveira is not coming off of a win.
I knew where you were going with that, and I agree. Absolutely, it's unfair, but I'm saying if we got to have all options on the table, then all options are on the table. And I say that because I don't know if you were going to go anywhere else with it, but
I was just going to say too. You better believe that the hardcores of hardcore would love that Oliveira fight, because Oliveira is a fan favorite. No matter who Oliveira is fighting, also too, I guess my counter argument to me saying that Oliveira wouldn't make sense. The counter argument is that Oliveira is still a former champion and is still a big star. So,
yeah, and the reason I bring that up, I bring 310 and everything up, Zain, and all this direction is you've got this. You've got Bilal's rumor last week, and you have those tweets from Conor very recently, the training footage on Instagram, the when I get free. I know you and I both don't want to speculate, but when I'm hearing 2 title fights potentially targeted for December, and I see a tweet like that from McGregor, and I know it sounds silly to say, but this little Ben the Bane Davis, Oscar Willis, Oscar obviously the Mac Life, so Conor would get involved because also he's part owner of BKFC. That tells me things for December are not going well.
Yeah, that would be my speculation too. I mean, obviously, I'm not in the UFC war room, so even if I was, there probably is in much I would actually be allowed to say. But
it's not anything that Dana already hasn't told us. Conor obviously has begged him, but Dana said at that one press conference, it's off of 2024. Now you're looking at 2025, which if it happens in 2025, I could care even less for the fight, because this is ridiculous how we're going to continue to keep waiting, which is why I feel bad for Michael Chandler. And I know what you said before about Chandler being 2-3 or something in his last, or 3-2 in his last 5. But when you look at this fight with Arman Tsarukyan, if Islam's not ready to go, I've said it, if you need to make it up to Chandler, here's an opportunity at this point.
Yeah, but I think it goes back to your original argument. The guy that deserves it, given the circumstances, is Hooker. I
Is
mean,
Hooker, yeah.
what he did in that Mateus Gamrot fight is something that no one's ever done to Mateus Gamrot. Not even close. And it could spark a new wave of a potential new Australian champion, which they love that market because of Volk. So it would end up being the best of both worlds if he was able to win that fight. So I think it's very interesting. But what I can say with confidence is, at the very least, assuming that things go the way I think they will, Arman Tsarukyan is going to be fighting somebody December 7th. So,
Mm-hmm. And like I said, and we'll talk about it more, I guess, with the bold predictions later. But if Arman Tsarukyan's fighting December 7th and Bilal Muhammad is fighting December 7th, I mean, Zain, the last time Conor McGregor main evented over a title fight, you have to go back to UFC 196. His upset loss to Nate Diaz. That's when Holman Tate fought in the co-main event for the women's bantamweight title. So,
right, yeah.
And with the current UFC structure under TKO, that they want title fights or McGregor fights.
That would
right,
never,
it would never happen.
Right.
So if two title fights are being, that's what I'm saying. Like, I know we don't want to speculate with that tweet, and maybe it does happen in 2025 and that tweet's all BS. But if two title fights are being targeted for 310, then either you're going to have the biggest UFC card, one of the biggest UFC cards of this year with Conor and two title fights, or the Conor fight's just not happening this year, like Dana said at the press conference.
Right. There's also, I've seen also on the internet, you've probably seen it too. There are the people who believe that Dana said, no, it's not happening this year because he knows it's happening this year. But it goes back to my original theory of that potential non-provable NDA that they have, where they might not be able to say anything, but they can at least milk it for as long as they possibly can.
That's true, because if they manage to get Conor and Chandler to work, you could move Bilal Shavkat or Tsarukyan Hooker or Tsarukyan Makhachev to 311 in January or 312 in February. This does give him the options. Like I said, that they needed to go into December with options.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they do have options. It's just a matter of what fight is going to please the fans. That's going to be the big question.
Absolutely.
What do you if you were to guess right now, we're recording this on August 26th. Who do you think headlines UFC 310 before we get off this?
Probably Bilal Muhammad, because I don't know because welterweight over lightweight, you know how the UFC does things. And two, I don't know about the status of Islam Makhachev.
See, I'm going to have to disagree with you. I think it's going to be Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland that headlines UFC 310.
You think they would get a deal done that quick in time?
I do, yeah.
I could see it if the UFC is desperate. So then, if you do middleweight main events, are you going with 3 title fights in December, or are you moving Arman, or you're moving Bilal off to January or something?
You would move those 2 fights to either both in January or one in January, one in February. That's how you would probably do it.
I could see that too, because I thought February was going to be the target after the Islam injury, that they would do Arman Islam in February.
Right, which would be in California, just like last February's card was, because they have that deal with Anaheim.
Right. So that does make sense. And then you could throw Bilal versus Shavkat. I mean, you could throw it somewhere. I don't need to get. Yeah.
I mean, if you were to guess, do you think that Bilal's convincing is going to make the UFC finally come back to my homes?
No.
He's the champion. In their grasp.
I know he's the champion, but Dana hates the living crap out of him.
I know. Well, he hates him, number one, and he hates our mayor and governor for number 2. So I'd say no. I'd say no and no.
You know what would convince him to go to Chicago, Zain? You know what would convince him? If you all in the city of Chicago, in the state of Illinois, as your mayor or as your governor, elected John Jones. Yeah, because John Jones is the greatest heavyweight of all time. So therefore, you know what? I mean, probably just the greatest of all time. So you know what? If he's the greatest of all time in MMA, he can make the greatest of all time mayor, one of the greatest of all time governor.
That's probably yeah yeah. Knowing how much of a glazier glazer Damon is regarding John Jones, yeah, that's probably the only. Oh my goodness!
I don't know what glaze is on that donut, Sam, but I don't want it. Oh.
No kidding. I just mean you laugh in tears right there. What have I done?
I kind of did that to myself, like I'm making that joke. All right, I need to calm down because we are moving on to a story that's a little less funny. Unless you want to save that for us to calm down, we just go to Caio Borralho first.
I guess let's go to the main event of Vegas.
Yeah, let's go to last week's main event because, oh my God, the Fighting Nerds. The Fighting Nerds. I think Zain, last weekend's main event, Borralho defeating Cannonier, put the stamp on for the Fighting Nerds. They have arrived, and let's be honest. And we talked about it with Pat earlier when we recorded the NFC preview. Borralho knocked him out. That fight should have been stopped with that minute or two to go in the 5th round.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I was freaking out, and I'm sure you were too, because if you were smart and did your research, you'd find out that Jared Cannonier had never been submitted, and he was almost submitted. Oh my God, I was freaking out.
No, it was unbelievable. I mean, there were some problems with the refereeing and judging all last weekend between PFL Hollywood and UFC Vegas 96, but ultimately, Caio Borralho just did absolutely amazing in there. It was a fun fight. I had it even going into the 5th round because Borralho messed him up with kicks in the 1st round. Then Cannonier came back with his punching power. Borralho stumbled him in the 3rd. And then at the end of the 4th round, Cannonier comes back with his power again. I think it was under this eye, Zain, his left eye. You saw like a little mouse on under Borralho's eye. I'm like, ooh. That's a little damaging.
And by the way, I'm sure you noticed this too, but when they showed the replay, the angle wasn't good to where you couldn't see what actually caused it. Even the commentary team was very confused because they only showed it for a brief second.
Don't say anything about commentary because the last 2 weeks of commentary with the UFC have been brutal.
Oh, that reminds me. I didn't get a chance to talk to you during the fight. Did you have a 2-2 like I did going into the 5th?
Yep, I had a very even fight going into the 5th. And I thought the 5th could have fallen either way too, halfway through it. And then Borralho dropped him. And I'm like, okay, this fight's done.
So do you agree that it was Borralho round 1, Cannonier round 2,
Borralho round 3, Cannonier round 4.
Round 4, yep. That's how.
And then, because Sean Sheehan had to tweet it out, because of course he does, the rules expert and all, did you agree with all 3 judges? Because he praised all 3 judges for giving the 10-8 for the near finisher. Should have been finished. Did you give the 10-8 to Borralho round 5? Because I did.
Of course. You have to. I mean, he was going in to finish the fight. Why would you not reward a guy for that? To me, that seems a common sense.
I mean, the fight should have been stopped, but the refereeing is just going to refereeing.
Right.
I don't know.
Oh, by the way,
I saw some people say that, I forget who was refereeing it, but they didn't step in because of what happened in the last Cannonier fight, the loss to Imavov, and how BS that was.
Oh yeah, because there was that whole controversy in Louisville. Well, that's right, and that was a stinker of a card anyway, and that just capped the night off as perfectly as a stinker card could be. It was like unreal. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I understand it from that point, but when a fighter is down, he was out for like a second or two and you gotta step in.
For sure. And I have to know, because I haven't asked you this either. That was a 5 versus 12 matchup at middleweight. Do you think going into that fight that Borralho was underranked? Because I believe with the way he performed this past weekend,
the way he performed, yes. And honestly, the way he performed, yes. I mean, number one, hey, 5-12 upset. I hear March Madness calling.
Yeah, that's exactly what that was.
And then number 2, I mean, when you look at the names that Caio Borralho has fought, Sam, like he's number 12, and I admit, right. And I was wrong because when we talked about he didn't have the experience, and the thing is, Borralho never had been in a 5-round fight, so it was interesting to see what he would have been like under 5 rounds. But listen to these names, Dan. So on the Contender Series, he beats Jesse Murray and Aaron Jeffrey, who's now a top-ranked prospect in Bellator. Right. And then he beats Godzi, he beats Arman Tsarukyan, Mahmoud Muradov, Mikhail Oleksijuk, Abus Magomedov, the guy that apparently Dana says nobody wants to fight.
Right. But who Sean Strickland absolutely destroyed.
And then this year he's knocked out Paul Craig and defeated and should have knocked out Jared Cannonier. I mean, but, for 7 or so fights, and that's noteworthy.
That's not bad, but still though, Paul Craig was 10-7 in the UFC.
Right.
That's not great. But in Craig's defense, he was fighting a who's who list of names at both 85 and at heavyweight and fighting in awards. So you can't. Right.
And the thing is,
discredit him for that.
And the thing is, this is like a perfect trajectory up for Borralho. He has fought the smaller names, and now he's gone to some more notable names. And now that he's being a former title challenger in Jared Cannonier, I mean, Zain, if you match him up next with a former champion, either Robert Whittaker, Israel Adesanya, or Sean Strickland, and Borralho passes that test, he's just clinched himself a title shot with the way he's performed.
Oh, 100%. And again, I don't think he would pass any of those guys over, right? Because he just beat his first big name. But at the very least, though,
you have to give him one of them next, though.
Yes, 100%.
So I think for Borralho, he's got to wait it out a little bit. Wait for a Duplessis Strickland matchup to play out. Wait for Whittaker versus Chimaev to play out in October, and then see what your options are for the start of 2025.
Right. And also you have to keep in mind too that if anything catastrophic happens at UFC 308 and shoot, I'm just gonna do it, and if I jinx
well, you know what? Hey, Zain, there are odds out there, and some of the odds have the favorite of Chimaev's going to pull out. So it's not that.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. But I was gonna make a joke to you and say, if I jinx it, you can ridicule me for that the fight was
the odds. Zain, the odds makers are believing it too. So if something happens, I mean, you got a guy there now.
I think he'd be ready. What do you think?
I think so too. I don't know if he'd get the win, but he'd definitely be ready.
Could you imagine how nutty the end of the year would be if Caio Borralho somehow knocks out Robert Whittaker?
Yeah, I think at that point, like I talked about last week, with Israel Adesanya, he would have to pray for a Robert Whittaker win. Actually, pardon me, no, he would have to pray. My point being, if Caio Borralho did that, Israel Adesanya is not seeing another title shot even off of a win for a while. If Caio Borralho pulled off that madness.
Oh, you mean madness? You mean
of knocking out Whittaker or something like that?
Right. If they hypothetically fight, you're 100% right. You'd have to pray
if Borralho fills in, if Hamzat goes out, Borralho fills in and beats Whittaker, he needs to be next in line for the winner of Strickland Duplessis too.
I think so too. And at that point, the rankings don't even matter. You just throw them out at a point. It's simply the guys who are available, and that's it.
Right. And Borralho's going to have the argument, I nearly knocked out a former title challenger, Cannonier. I would have beaten a former champ, Whittaker. He's got the resume at that point.
Yeah, which is, you know this too. It's so unbelievable that you and I are having this discussion right now, considering that 2 weight classes above middleweight, the guy who's deserving of the heavyweight title shot is not getting a title shot right now.
Zain, but John Jones is the greatest of all time. That's gonna be the name of this episode, of this minisode. But John Jones is the greatest of all time.
Right.
All right. A little bit of a sadder note. Casey Kenney. There's a little bit of a recent development. Arrested last week and actually was released officially from his UFC contract last week, even though he hadn't fought in a long while. Casey Kenney has had accusations of.
He hadn't fought in like 2.5 years. or so.
Kenney has had accusations of domestic violence before, which ultimately led him to not getting another fight in 2.5 years, as you mentioned. And I mean, the article that came out is, if you saw the details of it, it's sickening, it's disturbing, and it's a shame that people have tried to reach out to Casey Kenney and he has refused to help.
Yeah, it's a real disappointment, just because you know this too, because you used to cover the regional scene years ago. Like when this guy,
people loved Casey Kenney.
Right. I was gonna say when this guy was coming up, he was one of the most highly touted prospects that had come out of his area, if you will, in quite some time. And to see him just become a shell of I guess you could say, a totally different person, and just not, a valued member of society anymore, is just really disappointing. And then to hear the frantic scream in the videos from his then girlfriend, like it's very
sorry. No, sorry, you mentioned the screams, and I'm just like, oh, why'd you have to make me relive that?
Yeah, it's very disappointing. And what's even more disappointing too is when you have guys like, Sean O'Malley and Tim Welch literally saying that they don't want to talk about the Casey Kenney situation because they've tried to help him. That tells you all you need to know about the really bad path he took for himself. And the only thing I can really say is, let's go out to all the people that this impacted. It's obviously a really shitty situation, and I can't imagine how his family feels right now either, considering that they probably, and I assume so, they probably thought that that's not the person they'd raised him to be, and this is who he turned into. So,
So, I mean, I don't know what else you can say. It's sad that Kenney is refusing help, but for some people, it sounds a little mean to say, but for some people, sometimes they're beyond help until they've reached rock bottom. And I don't know how this can get any more rock bottom for Casey Kenney.
Yeah, just to clarify, assuming he never fights again, he finishes with an MMA record of 16-4-1 overall. His last fight took place in August of 2021, and that was a very, very close split decision loss to Song Yudong in one of the best fights of that year. So,
unfortunately, Zain, he's not going to be remembered for that fight or any of his fights for that matter.
No, unfortunately, but because I forgot about him, similar to you, I had to do a quick Google search, and I'm like, oh yeah, that is the guy who fought Song Yudong years ago, and it was just horrible to see. And then to see it come out on all of the different media outlets too was even just more sad.
Zain, he will, unless a miracle happens, he will forever go down as a what could have been.
That's 100% right. As he potentially joins a long list of guys, or with who were what could have been ends too. So that's what makes it even worse. So,
all right, looking at the PFL, the DC card this past weekend. So we have our World Championship fights. We have the 4 that we've discussed over the last few weeks, and now we have our last 2. Shamil Musayev, as a number 1 seed, ends up pulling off another win. He gets in, and Magomed Umaladov, Zain, after 2 years, he lost out in 1 year's postseason because of visa issues. Then last year was injury. He finally gets into a world title fight. That's going to be very interesting. Then you got Brendan Loughnane trying to erase, the disappointment of last year, trying to become a 2-time PFL featherweight champion, and he'll take on Timur Khizriev in the finals. So that Musayev Umaladov fight should be hella fun. That's my thought. Looking at these two.
That's going to be that's going to be awesome between these two fights specifically. My way too early pick, and it'll probably change by the time November rolls around. But my way too early pick is Musayev's magical run continues. What do you think?
I really want to see him a lot of hold up after everything that he's been through, but Musayev, man, he's been on a roll. He had that knockout last time. He was dominant here. Like, this is a guy who is worth paying attention to, and I've got a feeling that it might happen. I'm with you that I'm not going to be certain just yet, but my gut is leaning to Musayev.
Yeah, and Kisriev looked great, but there's just no way you can bet against Brendan Longney in big spots, in my opinion. This is where he thrives, and this is something that he made extremely clear all the way back in April, just after midnight in the Wintrust Arena media room, that he wanted to be back in this position again, and it's good to see that he kept well on his promise, because he's fought like an absolute stud, and he's definitely between these two featherweights, he was definitely someone that at the very beginning of the tournament I was like, this is the guy who deserves to be here, and I would be surprised if he wasn't in this fight. So it's good to see. So
absolutely. All right, and I'm going to agree with you, by the way. I really think Kisriev is going to be dangerous to Loughnane, but I'm going to trust that Lougnane's experience, his championship experience, is going to help him towards a win here. So give me Loughnane being a 2-time champ.
Yeah, I think he hurts him. I think Kisriev hurts him early in the fight, but I think Loughnane comes back and probably gets some sort of a third round finish or something like that, either by sub or.
I think if the fight plays out, if it goes the distance, the longer the fight goes, I think that favors Loughnane more.
Yeah, I think so too. Kisriev was going to have to get him out of there early, doesn't he? Yeah, probably.
All right, let's talk about let's quickly, just some bold predictions. Lay them on me.
Okay, so by the way, the reason for this segment is because we have no UFC event, and we're at a good halfway breaking point, so I figured I'd dig this out. So one of my bold predictions is that John Jones versus Stipe Miocic is going to get canceled again. That's what I think, and the UFC is going to have to cave in and give who what he wants.
Aspinall, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What do you?
I'm gonna.
That's my first bold prediction. What about you?
Okay. This one's going to break your heart because I know how much you're hoping for it, even though I could care less. If you say Jones Stipe isn't going to happen, I'm going to go with Conor versus Chandler. It's not going to happen.
Hey, I've kind of already accepted it, so it's no big deal. At this point, it'll either happen or it won't.
At this point, if it's not going to happen, you know my feeling. If it's not going to happen in 2024, I'm moving on from it.
I don't know if I believe this yet, but would you be surprised if Khalil Rountree went the distance with Alex Pereira?
I want to give him my respect, but if Alex Pereira can finish former champions in Jamal Hill and Jiří Procházka like he did, I think it's going to be Zain. You know what? I'll go with this for a bold prediction. It's going to be another first round finish for Pereira.
You're not going to believe this one, but I think Juliana Pena comes back after 2.5 years and beats Raquel Pennington to win the UFC Women's Bantamweight title.
That's not a surprise to me. I'm leaning Pena for that fight.
Really? That's interesting. Oh,
because she's the one who beat Nunes.
Oh yeah, the biggest bold prediction that I wanted to get off my chest was, I'm just going to say it right now. We're literally 2 months out from the day of the fight. I think Max Holloway knocks out Ilia Topuria and becomes the UFC featherweight champion again.
You and I are in agreement on that bold prediction.
Really? You think so?
Yep. I think Max Holloway reclaims his throne at 308.
You think he retires afterward or no?
Probably not. He's still 30, 31. He still has years he can go.
Oh, and then this isn't really a bold prediction, or maybe it is. I'm just gonna say it, and I hate to say it, because I was wrong last time, but I'm afraid to be wrong again. I think that if Alex Pereira beats Khalil Rountree, he will become the UFC heavyweight champion. And I'm just going to say this, a storyline going into 2025 is going to be, will Alex Pereira become the UFC heavyweight champion? And I will go as far to say that he can be. I think he can.
I don't know, only because he has that tease of dropping down to middleweight to reclaim that belt and be a two division champ there. Which, by the way, Jiří Procházka just came out with a video recently and said if Duplessis won, he would also consider dropping down to 185.
Right, but he would not fight Israel Adesanya because apparently they're under the same management. But he
Yeah.
would fight DDP,
Yeah.
which is
So
interesting.
it will be interesting to see if one of those two or both of them move down from 205 to 185.
For sure. And then I've got two more bold predictions.
Okay.
Number one is that I think Francis Ngannou knocks out Renan Ferreira inside 15 minutes. I think it's going to be a vintage Francis Ngannou performance for him to become the PFL Super Fight champion and hold on to that belt for quite some time. And then my other bold prediction is that Mike Tyson is going to be the first person to stop Jake Paul.
If that somehow happens, then Twitter would explode in happiness.
Do you have two final bold predictions before we move on?
No, I just had the few.
Okay.
I just had the few. That was it. All right.
Okay.
Want to finish up anyways. News and notes entering September. If you want to have anything there.
Sure. So, just to give you guys a little bit of a heads up, it's something that we're not doing the greatest job of keeping you guys informed. I mean, we do keep you informed we keep you informed once a week, but I just want to go through a few news and notes. So, Tom, in case you're curious, you are 3 fights behind Pat going into the month of September. You're currently sitting at 226, 127-4. Pat leads you at 229, 124-4, and I'm currently sitting at 195, 158-4. Just want to get your quick thoughts. How did it feel to have another inconsistent week this past week, going 6-6?
Sometimes these UFC Apex cards, man, are just hard to predict.
And I guess to add on to that, something I never mentioned. How do you feel about the blue corner sweeping the entire main card?
Shocked. Honestly, jaw dropped. Like, I did not think every blue corner was going to win.
For sure. And then you have any early impressions on who you think is going to headline the Macau China event on November 23rd, or who you'd like to see headline that card? Who would you want?
See, every time I think that they go to China, I would like it to be Weili Zhang, but obviously they're not going to book a strawweight title fight as a main event of a fight night, even though they've done it before.
Mm-hmm. You think it's going to be Song Yadong versus somebody, probably?
I think so. Song Yadong. Wait, is he going to be ready?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Is he going to be ready? I don't know.
It's a good question.
I feel like November. It's weird to say it because, Zain, we're from the days where 3 months isn't really too much time to think ahead, but it feels like UFC just makes these cards and doesn't book the main events until like a month or two out.
Yeah, it's very weird. I'd like to say Song Yadong headlines because I don't really know what other stars from that region that they would have to headline a fight night.
That's the problem. I can't think of any stars that they would.
But maybe that's just my arrogance, and we're not fully thinking about it because the Korean Zombie retired, so that's a little bit of a bummer. They couldn't use him anymore. But yeah, that's gonna be interesting. And then actually, I do have a bit of a prediction that I do think. Don't be surprised if the UFC Tampa card on December 14th is one of those rare fight nights where if they have no other options and they want to throw a title fight on there, don't be surprised if it's one of the lighter weight classes that it doesn't get a ton of shine, that maybe headlines a fight night card, just considering that the Tampa market might make sense. What were you gonna say?
Zain, does Peter Yan have a fight booked?
I don't think. Can you pause?
Yan and Song fought last time. No, shoot.
That kind of sucks.
They fought last. Corey Sandhagen just fought. Figgy, he's not going to look down. He's going to look up.
No, that doesn't make sense either.
Henry Cejudo is rumored for November 9th at the Apex. I mean, I don't know if Cheeto would be ready. I think Cheeto wants to take the rest of the year off.
That's what I've heard too, that Cheetah wants the rest of the year off.
They don't really have a lot of options for him in that weight class then, so.
Yeah, I'm surprised they. Well, then with that being said, I'm surprised they picked Macau as the location. Then,
Unless he does fight down and it's an 8-9 versus or an 8-10, which means Jose Aldo or Rob Font. They could do Yadong Font.
Well, Aldo's already fighting Batista, so
Batista, right? So,
I mean, I don't think Rob Font is a fight booked at the moment.
And have they fought before? No, no, they haven't fought before.
Yeah, that actually might be.
I guess that's there.
That actually might be a decent main event if they're both healthy. That would be interesting.
The only disappointment, like I said, is Yadong is going to have to fight down in the rankings.
Right. And then I guess my final news and note bit before we wrap up. I've done some math because I'm obviously a sicko for this stuff a little bit. There's been 357 UFC fights that have been completed so far this year. Let that sink in for just a minute.
Considering the amount of Bellator and PFL fights we've watched too, we've watched a lot of fights this year.
That's true. So 357 fights have been completed so far. Tom, a final question to you for this segment is: have we seen the best UFC fight this year yet, or is that still to come? What do you think?
It's going to be tough to beat Gaethje and Holloway.
I think so too. And then my final question before we wrap this segment up is: what are you most looking forward to as summer transitions over to fall in the world of combat sports?
To finally be rid of this heavyweight mess after November.
You would hope so. But there's a small chance we might not be.
So to be rid of the heavyweight mess after November and to see if Max Holloway can reclaim the featherweight throne at the end of October. Those are my two.
I agree with the Holloway Taporia opinion. I just want to see the thing that I'm most looking forward to is if somehow, some way, Bilal Muhammad gets a Las Vegas main event for the very first time in front of a packed arena, because you know that there are going to be the psychos out there that are not going to like it. So
I know. I will say though, because you mentioned Paul and Tyson in your bold predictions, and I bring up 309. I know I told it to you off camera, but I'll say it on camera. In the span of 30 hours, the weekend of November 15th and 16th, the Friday and Saturday, Paul Tyson, Bellator Newcastle, UFC 309 at MSG. Strap in, folks.
Yeah, that's a combat sports fan's dream, and
they're all not competing against one another. They're all at different times,
which is A, wild, B, super rare in the business that we're in, and C, they all have their own hidden storylines in some way, and D, all of them are semi-free, which is kind of unbelievable. So, for sure. Well, no, what am I saying? I'm stupid. UFC, of course, is a pay-per-view. This is our sign now that we need to wrap up. So now that we're officially wrapping up, be sure to like and subscribe to the Empty the Bench podcast network.
Only 309 is a pay-per-view. Paul Tyson, if you have a Netflix account, you can watch it anyway.
True, and if you have a HBO Max account, you can watch Bellator Newcastle too.
So the only one that you have to pay for is UFC, because of course you do.
That's right. So be sure to like and subscribe to the Empty the Bench podcast network. As I alluded to, we just eclipsed 860 subscribers. So again, thank you very much for helping us out on that front. And like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss anything. You go to youtube.com/ETB network to find out where all of our shows are, including this Minisode edition of the MMA Outsiders, the regular episode with the MMA Outsiders, which are still going to be going strong as we approach 100 episodes here in the next couple of weeks. Thank you to those who have supported the show since day one in the summer of 2022. Tom and I really appreciate it. You can also find my show, Bando's Breakdowns, as well as ETB Sports and all the other shows. And of course, you can get this show and every other show wherever you get your podcast.
Yep. All right. And then don't forget, also shout out to our friends over at Playback for all their sponsoring that they do. So that's going to do it for us. For Zain, I'm Tom. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Have a good one.